Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are Mythvision.
Dr. Price, this is I'm the mediator right now between heaven and earth. I'm not going to say hell. I'm going to give my friends the benefit of the doubt here in the mythical versus Jesus, historical Jesus group. Our good buddy Evan Powell. Right now I'm going to be hopefully interviewing him soon. He's written books, and he's big on the Q question. He doesn't think we need one. He's written on stuff on the chronology in which he thinks the Gospels may have been written. And I can't remember what he said exactly at some point, but the idea that Mark's Gospel ending at 16, verse 8, that 9 and on wasn't there, is that there's a problem that the primitive version of the Gospel of John chapter 21, we were talking about prior to hitting the record button, that it doesn't end, that it shouldn't end at verse 8 in Mark, but that I think he thought that you don't consider that or something as a possible there. We're going to have him on at some point. What are your thoughts? And I hate the fact that I haven't heard the argument thoroughly. Wish I had known that prior to this discussion. But nonetheless, are you aware of that connecting idea there with John chapter 21 as the ending of Mark, or having something to do with it?
Well, it seems to me a little too neat. It's sort of like when people say, I bet Gaius mentioned in 3 John must be the same Gaius mentioned in 1 Corinthians. Look, there were loads of guys named that, though these are the only two that pop up in the New Testament. So why connect the two? It's as if it's a puzzle or something. It seems highly unlikely. Well, here I sort of think the same thing. Here we have the Johannine appendix, and maybe it was originally the ending of Mark, but how would that have come about? How would somebody have lost this and somebody else found it and tacked it on to John? It seems to me that, I don't know if he says that whoever added it on to John did anything to embellish it, but like the bearing witness business, it has Johannine vocabulary on it, but I think that this is the work of the ecclesiastical redactor anyway, who was some sort of Johannine Christian, and they all, just like the writers of the so-called Johannine epistles, they themselves describe a schism within the movement, and that would be enough to explain similar language. But it's a fascinating theory, and it takes off from, you could say that at the end of Mark, the young man in the tomb says, "Go tell Peter and the others to meet Jesus in Galilee," but they don't tell anybody. Well, you could say that the natural sequel to that is the disciples have gone back to their old jobs in Galilee. They think it's all over. And then when they see Jesus, they don't expect to. This seems to be the first resurrection appearance. And they say, "Who's that on shore?" It is the Lord. Like it's they don't expect to see him. He's the last thing they expect to see. And that would kind of make sense. Why would they be surprised if these other appearances in John 20 had already taken place? What are they doing on the Sea of Galilee or Tiberias, if that's the case? So they've gone back to Galilee, but they've just given up on the whole thing, like the two disciples going back to Emmaus. So that would make sense. It has the miraculous catch of fish that's also in Luke 5, and like that version of it, it contains the ordination of the disciples. I will make you fishers of men in one instance, and he says to Peter, basically, I will make you a shepherd of men, and follow me. So there's that similarity, though Mark already had the calling. But maybe he needs to renew it after the resurrection. Let's see. And that would give us one resurrection appearance instead of none. Now, I don't know whether the Greek, the vocabulary and so on, in the two pieces are compatible. I've never studied that. I don't know anybody else who has. Maybe he does. But I kind of, so it makes some sense, but I wonder how it would have happened. I guess, like, there's a kind of a similar case with a woman taken in adultery. That is not in the earliest copies of John that we have, but it appears in a couple of different places in John once it does pop up, and it also appears in 2 or 3 places in Luke. Which certainly implies that this was a bit of another gospel or an orally transmitted story that somebody said, this is too good to lose. Let's tack it on somewhere, which it is, of course. And if this is an analogy with the Johannine appendix, then it's surprising a little bit that it appears only here. And there is a little bit of textual evidence that it was not originally in John. I mean, form critically you can tell it wasn't, because whoever ended chapter 21 has obviously just sort of paraphrased the original ending of the gospel at the end of chapter 20. It's possible and it's fascinating, which is a big plus in my view, but I don't think you can say, yeah, this must have happened.
So it's something to consider, or even to build a case on if it is possible. So I definitely got to get our buddy on the show, and we can talk about this stuff at some point, because that's what he specializes in, from what I understand, and I look forward to reading the material. He's emailed me. Thanks for taking the time to answer that, and get our friends on the Mythical and Jesus Facebook group on the same page. So
I got to read that book. I've had it for years, meaning to get to it because it is such a fascinating thing. I'll have to read it, though.
Join our Patreon